Andrea Russett had once thought that she had found a place to contribute, to prove her worth, and to show that persistence could take her to great heights in her career. She was a creative marketing expert, and the company she worked for, a major advertising firm, was where she had spent more than 10 years of her youth. Her energy and her groundbreaking ideas to build effective strategies. Andrea wasn't someone who sought fame or power, but she knew that she could make a difference in the highly competitive marketing industry. The company had become a part of her life, and each small success was evidence of Andrea's contribution. The intense meetings, the groundbreaking projects, and the bold strategies she personally led had all contributed significantly to the company's strong growth over the years. Her colleagues admired her, her superiors trusted her, and the clients were satisfied with the results she delivered. It was a position many would envy, a career that seemed solid and unshakable. But then, like a storm hitting one morning, Andrea received a call from Human Resources. Her heart sank immediately. She wasn't someone easily shaken, but something about the atmosphere that day made her uneasy. When she entered Trent Morrison's office, the company's new CEO, his calm demeanor did nothing to calm her. He didn't stand up, nor did he invite her to sit. Only his cold gaze on the computer screen met her. "Hello? Andrea," Trent began, his voice cold and flat, devoid of any emotion. "We've decided to cut the marketing department's budget. Along with that, I think you should reduce your involvement in major projects. As for you, your salary will be adjusted. This will take effect next month." Andrea couldn't find the words to speak. She felt as though the entire world had just collapsed beneath her feet. She had devoted her youth and her creative abilities to this company, only to receive these cold, indifferent words from someone she had trusted. Everything had changed in a single morning, a shock she had never anticipated. She had hoped that, with everything she had done, the company would appreciate her efforts. But now, she was no different than a tool that had lost its value. Since Trent's appointment, everything had changed. He was knowledgeable, but lacked empathy for those who had long been dedicated to the company. His treatment of employees, his decisions made without consulting anyone, made it clear people like Andrea, those who had long been loyal and persistent with the company, no longer fit into the so-called growth strategy Trent was implementing. In his eyes, Andrea's contributions had become outdated, no longer aligned with the company's vision, and that's why her salary was reduced, why she was pushed out of the picture without a word of thanks, without any appreciation. As Andrea stepped out of Trent's office, she felt like everything had been stripped away from her. The emptiness was indescribable, as if part of her had been severed, leaving a deep wound she didn't know would ever heal. She had given her life to this company. But now, she was just an invisible figure. The projects she had dedicated herself to, the strategies she had developed, were now forgotten. She was nothing more than a name erased, a number in the statistics, and Trent was the one who had the power to decide everything. She returned to her desk, once a place of creativity, where she had helped shape the company's identity. Now, the desk was cold, empty, as if all those memories had vanished with time. She no longer saw the enthusiasm, no longer felt the passion. Everything was now just exhaustion, disappointment. Angela, her young assistant, whom she had mentored, had taken her seat, wearing a self-satisfied smile, no explanation, no proper handover, just a simple replacement. Andrea could do nothing but pack up and leave in silence, without a word of protest. She walked out the door, the sound of it closing behind her. An uncomfortable silence enveloped the space. It felt like part of her had died, but like a song that had ended, it also opened a new chapter. Andrea didn't know what she was supposed to feel right now: resentment, anger, or just an indescribable pain. But one thing was certain: she wouldn't let it end like this. This wasn't the conclusion she had hoped for, and it was certainly not how she would leave this game. All she knew right now was that she wouldn't let those who had betrayed her, those who had seen her as a tool of no value, enjoy their victory. Andrea would rise again, quietly, powerfully, and prove that everything she had done for this company wasn't just a coincidence. She would come back not for revenge, but to reclaim what was rightfully hers. And when it was all over, no one would be able to deny her true worth. A few months passed, and Andrea had learned to accept the changes that she couldn't control. At first, it felt as though she was adrift in a world without direction. Each morning, she would face herself in the mirror with a sense of unfamiliarity, as if the reflection before her was not the person she once knew. The immense loss in her career, everything she had built and protected, had cast her into an indescribable void. But there was one thing she couldn't deny. She couldn't just stand still in the pain. She had to rise, even if everything around her seemed to be pushing back. In the first weeks after the shock, Andrea sought a quiet space to reflect on herself. She didn't rush to find a new job or lay blame on anyone. She needed time to calm her mind and look back on everything that had happened. Each morning, she began jogging in the park near her home. It seemed to be the only way for her to catch her breath, to clear her mind, to escape the overwhelming pressure. Walking through the park, she realized that perhaps she needed to change herself as well. Her thoughts no longer revolved around the past. She didn't want to live forever in what had already happened. That was the first step in reclaiming her own power. With a renewed spirit, Andrea began to make plans. She didn't blame those who had betrayed her. She didn't focus on what she had lost. Instead, she only thought about what she could do next. For someone in marketing like her, creativity never ran out. She began exploring new technologies, the ways in which big companies were implementing advertising strategies, and more importantly, how to build a powerful image not just from the projects she had worked on, but from herself, to avoid getting lost in the chaos of ideas. Andrea started writing everything down. She created a detailed plan for her entrepreneurial journey. She didn't tell anyone, didn't share it with those around her. Every day, she quietly wrote out the necessary steps, each small strategy, every specific goal. Andrea knew she needed a smart and meticulous strategy, no rushing, no waste. What she had once done for her old company wasn't a failure, but rather a lesson that would take her further and make her stronger. But life was never as simple as that. Just as Andrea was ready to start over from scratch, another challenge came her way. An email from her old company demanded her attention. They needed her help. A request from Trent, who was still sitting in the CEO's chair. They wanted her to come back, but this time, their offer was no longer one of respect. It was a dull invitation. They didn't care about her past efforts and contributions. This time, they only wanted her to work in the way they dictated, as a tool in their hands. Receiving that offer, Andrea was close to rejecting it immediately, but something inside her made it impossible to ignore. She didn't respond right away. That night, she sat down and thought. She knew that returning wasn't about revenge, but she couldn't allow herself to be used again without proper respect. She had gained invaluable lessons over the past few months. She couldn't return just for the sake of comfort. She couldn't let herself be forgotten again. So she began to act, but Andrea's actions were not loud, not public, not rushed. She did only what was necessary to rebuild a solid foundation for herself. Starting with the smallest steps, she began reconnecting with old partners, those who had worked with her on previous projects. She sought new opportunities to prove her worth, not to Trent, not to her old company, but to herself. She wanted to reaffirm that she could achieve great things, not for the recognition of others, but because she truly deserved it. Every day, Andrea dedicated time to learn more about the industry she had immersed herself in throughout her career. She learned how to incorporate new technologies into marketing strategies, gained a deeper understanding of market trends, and discovered ways to develop herself in an increasingly competitive environment. Each of her steps was a relentless effort to overcome the difficulties, the negative emotions she had left behind. But life was never as simple as that. One morning, Andrea received a message from Monica, an old friend from her former company. She told her that Angela, the young assistant Andrea had once mentored, had started implementing the strategies Andrea had developed before, without giving her any credit. Not only was Angela taking Andrea's ideas, but she was also trying to impress Trent and the other leaders at the company. Monica told Andrea that Angela was getting closer to a high position in the company. With everything she was doing stemming from the strategies Andrea had created, this news didn't make Andrea angry. Instead, it only made her more determined. Angela might steal her ideas, might walk through the doors she had opened, but that didn't mean Andrea would just stand by. She would create a new strategy, one that even Trent couldn't predict. She would reclaim what she had lost, not by confrontation, but by proving that she was the one with true value. Andrea didn't rush. She wasn't hasty. Every step she took was carefully calculated, with even the smallest details weighed. The loss she had endured wasn't just a shock. It was a valuable lesson. She was no longer someone who followed. She would become the one leading, the one mastering this game, each passing day. She felt herself growing stronger, reclaiming what she had lost. But this time, she would not repeat the same mistakes. Everything began to change when Andrea received a call from an old partner she had worked with in the past. He wanted to meet with her to discuss a new project, and this piqued Andrea's curiosity. However, she didn't rush to meet him. Instead, she took her time to assess and weigh the possibilities. Why had this partner reached out after all these quiet years? And more importantly, why had he called someone like her, who had just been coldly discarded by her old company? When the meeting finally took place, Andrea realized that opportunities don't always come in the way you expect. Her old partner was an experienced figure in the industry, someone she had once collaborated with to develop marketing strategies. He had information about market changes Andrea hadn't yet discovered, and most importantly, he saw in her a potential she had nearly forgotten. He wasn't just interested in working with Andrea because of their past successes. He believed she had the ability to create a revolutionary marketing strategy for a new project. With a bit of hesitation, but also excitement, Andrea decided to join the project. She knew this was the opportunity she needed. However, working with a new team was not easy. The employees she had once worked with at her old company now turned their backs, no longer looking up to her, but instead questioning her, even confronting her. Angela, the assistant Andrea had mentored, had been relentlessly trying to claim her position at the old company, and now she was starting to take control of the information Andrea had once created. However, Andrea wouldn't allow herself to be hindered. She had silently developed a new, more creative, and powerful strategy, not only to prove that she still had value, but also to rebuild the position she truly deserved. The marketing project Andrea began working on was designed to address a major problem in the market. It wasn't just a product that would meet consumers' needs, but one with immense potential in the market. To achieve this, Andrea started collaborating with people who shared her vision, individuals who were ready to join her through the challenges she knew would not be easy to overcome. But things didn't go as smoothly as Andrea had hoped, just as the product was about to be launched. An unexpected attack from her old company occurred. Angela, under Trent's direction, quickly launched a similar advertising campaign, using the very strategies Andrea had developed. What was their goal? To deceive the market and regain the leading position Andrea had spent years building. Angela relentlessly used every tactic to claim what she thought was hers, from stealing Andrea's marketing strategies to taking over the partners Andrea had once trusted. But Andrea wasn't flustered. She didn't lose her composure. She had prepared for this situation. The more Andrea watched Angela's moves and the actions of her old company, the more she realized that there were things that couldn't be easily stolen. She had developed a marketing strategy that didn't just rely on conventional tools, but also incorporated in-depth market analysis data that even Trent couldn't see. She didn't just understand her customers. She understood the psychology of the company's leadership. That was the weakness Andrea knew how to exploit. The competition began to escalate. Everyone was focused on the campaign Andrea had just launched, while Angela and Trent tried to maintain the position they thought they had secured. But gradually, the market began to listen to what Andrea had to offer. Her strategies weren't just sophisticated, they were creative, captivating consumers' minds, and most importantly, making them feel connected. She was no longer just an outsider. Now, she was the one leading the game. More and more partners began to return to Andrea, those who had once abandoned her, now realizing that she was the one who could help them grow. Andrea's project started to achieve extraordinary success. First came the positive feedback from consumers. Then large contracts were signed. And finally, strategic partners she had always dreamed of appeared. Everything Andrea was doing began to attract media attention. She didn't need to promote herself. Her success spoke for itself. But Angela and Trent didn't stop. They continued trying to undermine Andrea's value in the eyes of her partners and clients. However, every time they acted, Andrea proved that her strategies were always one step ahead. Then, one day, an unexpected event occurred. Trent and Angela's marketing strategies began to experience significant failures. The data they were using to promote their product was leaked and misused. This caused their product to lose substantial value in the eyes of the market. The reason was simple. They hadn't understood the profound values Andrea had tapped into. They hadn't recognized the importance of the elements she had built over all these years. Andrea looked at the failure of her old company without any sense of satisfaction. She only knew one thing: she had proven her worth, not by defeating them, but by doing exactly what she knew had to be done. And their failure wasn't her victory. It was the cost of arrogance and lack of vision. Andrea sat in her office, quietly gazing out the window where the afternoon sunlight bathed the swaying branches in gold. The past months had felt like a sudden downpour, but now she could sense the calm after the storm, each passing day. She had learned how to heal, not by seeking forgiveness from those who had abandoned her, but by restoring her belief in herself. She knew she was on the right path. However, there was one thing Andrea had never forgotten, the reason she began this journey in the first place. The sense of relief came when she truly began to see herself again, no longer a victim of betrayal, no longer someone who had once been considered irreplaceable. She had learned from her failure, and now Andrea felt her resurgence within herself stronger than ever. From that moment on, she knew she couldn't stay on the sidelines. It was time to truly return, not for revenge, but to prove that she could go farther than anyone had ever imagined. One morning, As news about the collapse of Trent and Angela's marketing campaign began to spread, Andrea received an unexpected call. On the other end was an old friend, a partner from the days when she had worked at her former company. He didn't say much, just invited her to meet in person, knowing that there would be many matters to address. Andrea didn't hesitate. She sensed that this was the moment when everything could change completely. She knew she had to make a decisive move. When they met, Andrea realized that she wasn't the only one who saw the opportunity. The old partner, someone she had collaborated with before, recognized that Andrea could be the key to a completely new marketing strategy. He didn't just see her as a part of the past, but as the only person capable of leading a revolution in the industry. Andrea didn't waste any time. From that point, she set to work on crafting her own strategy for a new project. This project wasn't just about numbers and data. It was about rebuilding a stronger, more connected image with the community, bringing real value to consumers. Throughout the process, Andrea continued to rebuild relationships with the partners she had worked with in the past. Although her old friends weren't easily willing to return, Andrea proved that her strategy wasn't just creative, it was truly effective. She not only regained their trust, but also created a solid support network where the old partners no longer saw her as a victim, but as someone standing alongside them. With a fresh, new vision, more and more, Andrea realized that she didn't have to prove herself to anyone but herself. She had overcome the challenges, and now she was no longer just a marketer, but a true leader. Each day, she grew more confident in the strategy she had carefully crafted, and gradually, it began to gain recognition from those around her. Her former company, the place where she had been abandoned and belittled, seemed to be falling into turmoil, although they desperately tried to maintain their image. Andrea knew that the collapse of the marketing campaign they had launched would not be easily recovered. This proved that what she had created couldn't be easily replaced by shallow tactics. A month later, when things seemed to have begun stabilizing, Andrea received a message from Monica, a former friend at the company. She told Andrea that Angela had encountered a major setback with her recent advertising campaign. Though Angela had been the first to propose the idea, she couldn't adjust the strategy in time when the crisis hit, causing the campaign to not only fail, but also severely damage the company's image. People within the company began criticizing Angela, with many believing that she wasn't capable of handling such a large-scale project. It was then that Andrea realized this was her greatest opportunity to return, not with revenge, but with a strong and solid comeback. She didn't need to confront Angela or Trent directly. She didn't need to fight them on their own turf. She just needed to do what she did best, build a strategy that couldn't be overturned. Andrea reached out to key partners and proposed collaborations no one could refuse. She didn't just win, she made others recognize her contributions. With a firmly established strategy, Andrea approached several major industry partners and began laying the foundation for her career. Those who had once looked down on her, those who had betrayed her, now had to face a reality they never expected. Andrea's strategies began to dominate the market, and her company flourished. The people who had stolen her opportunities were no longer her concern. She didn't need to do anything to seek revenge because her success was the best answer to all their doubts. Andrea sat in her new office, quietly looking out the window, where the soft morning light filtered through the glass, reflecting on the polished wooden desks. This was not the place she had once worked, not her old company filled with memories now faded into distant recollections. But here, in this space, she had rebuilt her career, a place where what she had lost would not only be restored, but taken to new heights. Her efforts hadn't just helped her rise again. They had built a stronger and more sustainable empire. She didn't need to confront those who had betrayed her, didn't need to face Trent or Angela directly. She understood that the real battle wasn't about defeating anyone, but about proving that her value could not be erased by power games or disrespect. Andrea had proven herself through results, by making her strategies a resounding success in the industry. New partners, major clients began to seek her out. She wasn't just the winner of a race. She was the one creating true difference, a difference that could not be faded away. The project she had meticulously built began to attract attention from the media and major organizations. Andrea's success wasn't just from creativity, but from her ability to understand the market and offer strategies ahead of their time. She had built a strong team, individuals who walked alongside her on this journey. They trusted Andrea, not because she was a part of the past, but because she could lead them to heights they hadn't yet imagined. At the same time, Andrea never forgot her old friends. Even though her former company had turned its back on her, those she had once worked with remained, always watching over her and offering support when needed. Occasional meetings with Monica, a loyal friend through the hard days, were moments Andrea cherished. She knew that these friends had helped her see herself again, and they would be the ones witnessing her success. Andrea didn't need to prove anything to them. She had done it all without the validation of those who had betrayed her. Andrea's recovery wasn't just about work. She had regained trust in herself, in life, and more importantly, in her ability to change. Each day, she wasn't just working, she felt her own growth. She no longer felt loss or regret. Instead, she felt grateful for everything she had gone through, for the challenges that had made her stronger. That was the gift life had given her, a gift she could never have imagined while still at the bottom of failure. As for Trent and Angela, they were no longer of concern to her. Andrea didn't feel hatred, didn't feel the need to make them fail so she could be celebrated. She didn't need revenge. In fact, the downfall of her former company, where Trent and Angela were still scrambling to restore their reputation, was the clearest evidence of their impotence. The strategies they relied on were now nothing more than unhealed wounds, and they wouldn't be able to save anything. In reality, their collapse wasn't the result of a major failure. It was the consequence of arrogance, of not understanding the true value of those who had helped them reach the top. Yet Andrea didn't feel any satisfaction at their failure. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She didn't need to say that she had been right or that she was the best. Her success was all she needed for others to reevaluate her worth. And when she looked back, Andrea understood that true value wasn't about defeating others or acquiring things. True value lay in resilience, in being able to rise after being knocked down and continue moving forward with confidence, with a new vision. When Andrea looked back at her journey, she didn't feel she had taken revenge. She didn't feel that her victory had any bitterness or sweetness to it. What she felt was calmness, a deep understanding of herself. She didn't need to confront or fight anyone. Those who had betrayed her were now just faint shadows in her life. She had found a new path, one where she no longer had to endure disdain or accept being looked down upon. Andrea's story wasn't one of revenge or glory. It was a story of resilience, of the ability to rise after life's shocks. She had rediscovered her true worth, not through external successes, but by facing herself, confronting both her past and her future in life. Sometimes we don't need to make others fail to feel like we've won. True victory is when we can stand strong, do what we love, and know that we deserve the good things life has to offer,